Hi, I'm Junhyuk, a postdoctoral researcher at UIST Korea. The title of my paper is Stereoscopic Viewing and Monoscopic Touching, Selecting Distant Objects in VR Through a Mobile Device. My co-authors are Taegyu, Sanghyun, Seungjun, and Professor Seokhyung-bae. Here is my favorite scene from the movie Iron Man 2, where Tony Stark holds up his transparent smartphone and selects a distant TV screen through it and uploads videos that he wants to play on it. For me, the idea of holding and touching a tangible interface to interact with something that can be seen through it has always felt very elegant. We don't live in a world of transparent smartphones, but we do in a world of mixed reality computing, where we are beginning to take the thin and light smartphones into VR and make use of their multi-touch and pen input capabilities. In VR, even ordinary smartphones can be made to appear and work as transparent smartphones, so users can interact with distant virtual objects similar to the way in which Tony Stark did in the movie. However, here is a secret that Hollywood doesn't want you to know. It's called a binocular parallax that causes double vision. Focusing on the finger makes the distant object appear as two, and focusing on the distant object makes the finger appear as two. This happens to anyone who has two eyes, both in reality and virtual reality, so Tony may sometimes find it difficult to select objects through his transparent device. We can actually calculate when objects would be too far or too small to select due to binocular parallax. When the distance between the eyes is large L, between the device and the eyes is large D, between the device and the object is small d, and the width of the object is small w, we can calculate a measure of difficulty. When this value is above 0, the object is close or big enough that the user can select despite the parallax. When this value is 0, the selection is just barely possible. Finally, when this value is below 0, the object is too far or too small that a precise selection is impossible because of the parallax. Here is a solution that we propose. When selecting through a transparent device, display a perspective-corrected monoscopic render of the scene on the screen. Maybe you have seen these pictures of fake transparency before. This is what I mean, but in real time. So, when the user is not selecting, the device is fully transparent to enable stereoscopic 3D viewing, and when selecting, the device fakes transparency to enable monoscopic 2D touching without the binocular parallax, and after that, the device becomes fully transparent again. However, there is still a sudden jump in the focal distance from the far object to the near device, and vice versa, as visualized by the blue and red lines, which can be perplexing. So we wanted to make this transition gradual. Fake transparency is homographic reprojection, so it can be considered as some kind of flattening. We can interpolate and animate this flattening as the user's fingertip approaches the device or moves away from it. This is what the transition between the stereoscopic viewing mode and the monoscopic touching mode looks like without the flattening animation and with the flattening animation. Okay. To implement our technique, we needed to track the smartphone very reliably in good sync with the hands tracked by the VR headset without adding too much weight or volume that can affect the selection performance and cause fatigue. We ended up using a clear acrylic panel in the shape of a regular iPhone. This allowed the Meta Quest 2 VR headset to track the fingers without any occlusion. We calculated the position and orientation of the panel from the positions of the joints of the fingers that held it, the only caveat being that you had to hold the panel in only the predetermined postures. We used a microphone to pick up the noise that is created when the fingertip makes contact with the panel to detect a touch. Because this noise was sometimes too small, we attached a small piece of metal to the fingertip to make this noise louder. Using this implementation, we conducted an evaluation where participants repeatedly selected green targets that appeared at varying angular displacements and radial distances in a predetermined, scrambled, and counterbalanced order. We also placed a yellow start button at the center so that each task began from the same gaze and pointing directions. We recruited 12 participants who made 1,728 selections in total with our technique and the most widely used raycasting as the baseline technique. Here's what those selection tasks looked like with the baseline raycasting technique and the proposed technique from the outside and inside of VR headset. Our technique was 27% quicker on average and up to 33% quicker at 6 meters. Our technique was also 45% more precise on average and up to 49% more precise at 9 meters. Note that the differences were bigger at larger target distances. With ray casting, selection becomes a lot more difficult as target distance increases, like shooting a tennis ball with a laser pointer across a large meeting room. However, with our technique, no matter how far the target, the selection only involves touching a 2D circle on a 2D screen, which is much easier. Our technique also scored better than neutral in all NASA TLX-based questions asking about the subjective demands. The participants answered that our technique was less mentally demanding, more performant, and less frustrating than ray casting. Many participants likened our technique to using the autofocus feature of a camera so that both the target and the fingertip come into sharp focus. Others mentioned that it felt like bringing the distant target to the fingertip for touching. We are really excited by all the immersive applications that our technique enables. Perhaps in a VR car design studio, the user can change the color of the car by holding up a virtual palette against it. Perhaps on a metaverse street, the user can quickly select a moving avatar to bring up details about that avatar. Perhaps in a VR space battle, the user can tap consecutively to select multiple spacecrafts and swipe to send them away. I would like to leave you with 2 take-home messages. First, always think about binocular parallax whenever there is a faraway object and an overlay of interface that is closer. All the images and videos that we create are monoscopic, and they make us forget that we have 2 eyes, each of which sees a slightly different version of the world, creating a parallax that causes usability problems. We even had to invent a new visualization method just to show this to you. Second, start putting VR and smartphones together because VR headsets are getting better and better, and smartphones are not going away anytime soon. The transparency metaphor can offer a very elegant way of enabling multi-touch and pen input capabilities in immersive workspaces. So, if you're Apple, please let us use iPhones and iPads this way in the upcoming Vision Pro headset. And if you're Meta or Microsoft, you should do this before Apple does it. I would like to conclude with an announcement. We tried our best to tell you all about the binocular parallax, but it is still really difficult to get a sense of why it is a problem and how our technique solves it. So I am demoing our technique tonight, so feel free to come and try at our booth ID 999. Thank you so much.
Any question from the audience?
Hi, Yuan Liu from University of Notre Dame. This is a really cool project. I really like it. Just a quick question about the choice of smartphone, because smartphones tend to be really heavy compared to the glass you were testing in your experiments. Mm-hmm. How do you think about like holding a smartphone and while you're having a headset on, just holding it to try to select it? Does that create any strains on people's hands?
Yes, that's a really great question, and I would like to answer this by saying that I think I submitted different versions of this paper like 6 times over the last 10 years. They all had different hardware configurations, and one of those had the heavy smartphones, and we attached like a rubber band from the ceiling so that the participant wouldn't be as fatigued and so on and so forth. But I think regular smartphones are okay. But if we start attaching like tracking modules and other markers, they can quickly add up the fatigue factor. So we wanted to eliminate that by using a prop instead of actual smartphone and modules. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the congrats for the acceptance eventually. So I have a follow-up question. How do you think about if we, because we also have the handheld controllers for VR headsets currently, what if we just attach a touchpad, like a transparent even touchpad onto the controller? Mm-hmm. How does it work? Does your work support that?
Yeah, also a great question. So we also considered like attaching a touch capacitive touch panel to the panel, but we actually wanted to make it as minimal as possible. And we are kind of hoping that by showing these kind of application scenarios, companies like Meta and Apple would support natively tracking of the smartphones, which would eliminate every problem that was mentioned here. Thank you. Hi.
Hello, Hemant from Meta. Really great presentation, and also I really like this paper and the idea. I have a quick question around, did you find any pattern of how people orient the device and where the touch point, like the different touch points are on the device itself?
Wow, that's also a very great question, which would have probably been better answered by a previous version of the paper that I submitted earlier. But I can answer that in a short. I think people usually tend to touch on the upper side because they have to raise it, right? Most of the times they're raising, and they're kind of lazy, so they're not raising as fully as people should, and so they're kind of half raising it, and people are like touching on the upper side mostly.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Was there any, like in subjective analysis of the experience, was there any pattern of like hand representation? Like were there any comments around how the hand was sort of like shown in the VR experience? Did people expect it to be transparent, or like only like fingertips are shown, something like that?
Okay. I think it's really difficult to explain in video or words how this actually feels like. So I think the best way would be for you to come to the demo and try it yourself.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the demo too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please remember to come to the demo session. Thanks, June, again.